Okay, go ahead.
So welcome, everyone. I'm Barry Bruce, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Jack Alpert. Jack has led the Stanford Knowledge Integration Lab since 1978. And what you're about to hear is a response to the very high probability that our planet will very rapidly become unlivable. And cognitively, we seem not up to the task of saving ourselves. This presentation suggests the opposite of business as usual. And so you'll have to judge for yourself. Is it rational? Is it dystopic? Does it reflect a utopia? So you decide, as I said, and have your questions ready. But before we start, I also want to mention that Jack isn't finished. Jack will never be finished. Uh, he needs your help, and he'd like to recruit some of you to, if you feel inspired, to work on pieces of the design. So hang on to your hats, folks, and over to Jack. Take it away.
Hi, I'm honored that you're viewing this talk. It's a collaboration with Robert Castillo. I would like to thank CACOR, Art, Dave, Claude, and Barry. My work would not have been completed without their encouragement. Uh, I should laugh. I apologize if my talk will be like drinking from a fire hose. It's based on previous talks given at CACOR. 3 were included in your invitation to this meeting. If you have questions, please feel free to contact me directly. Let me begin. Everyone can see how some behavior creates some outcomes, but it gets more difficult when the outcomes happen in 10 minutes or at the end of the month or at high school graduation or retirement. Seeing future outcomes is more difficult when they include family or town or nation or world. And it's harder to see future outcomes when they fall farther in the future. For example, they fall on your great great grandkids. It's harder to see future outcomes when they fall on beavers and butterflies and turtles, or they require the behaviors of many actors, or the acts of powerful organizations like industry, or the interactions among nations like wars. The video investigates how many versions of temporal, spatial, and group behaviors. Sorry about the dog. Change the outcomes, if the behaviors change the outcomes of global civilization over the next 3 centuries. Uh, that's a pretty big challenge. Most of us are never even considered such a challenge. We don't see ourselves behind the steering wheel. Let's begin our effort by reviewing the basic mechanics of how behaviors change outcomes. Then use these mechanics to create a model that presents the behaviors of generations that determine civilization outcomes centuries in the future. The mechanics are simple. Behavior 1 converts conditions into future condition 1, or behavior 2 converts existing conditions into conditions 2. These changes happen over time. Existing conditions 1 exist at time 1, and future conditions exist at time 2. Using these modeling tools, we can create this map that shows sequences of behavior and conditions that describe civilization's various path forwards. At first glance, this map may look overwhelmingly complex. However, if we wipe the page blank and leave only the title and rebuild it a step at a time using simple behaviors to create simple conditions that create future paths forward, then it's possible to compare different paths and create a preference of one path over the other. First step in building such a path is adding timelines that show when behaviors alter conditions. For example, here is the timeline that anchors our civilization's initial conditions in 2025. And here is the timeline that anchors conditions at the end of this century. And here is the timeline that anchors conditions 3 centuries from now. Next, we imagine a wide range of outcomes for the year 2300. For example, the viable civilization, the one everyone hopes for, humans living gracefully inside the ecosystem with undisturbed beavers, no conflicts, and advancing arts and sciences. The Dark Age civilization, the one gloom and doomers think is our present destination, the one where survivors of collapse are trapped living like 17th century serfs. The digitized civilization, the one where digitized humans without biological bodies fit into their niche in the ecosystem. And the paved over civilization, where humans keep expanding their presence on Earth until they pave over everything. Now we can imagine behavior condition sequences that produce each outcome. Of course, arriving at one or the other outcomes depends not only on which behaviors are chosen, but also what technology and what mass energy flows have become available. Let me insert into the model 3 diverse views of technological advancement and resource availability, and then use them as the starting points of behavior condition sequences that lead to the outcomes in the year 2300. For example, each tech and supporting resource, for example, existing tech and supporting resources, expanding tech and supporting resources, new birth and sterilization tech and existing supporting resources. With these 3 tech and resource starting points, we can imagine many paths to civilization's conditions. First, at the end of the century, and second, at the end of 3 centuries. Let's focus on Earth with today's tech and resources. Today on Earth existing path, we expect a decline of non-renewable resources, which will lead to scarcity, conflict, a death spiral, which will produce 13.4 billion deaths from starvation and conflict, which will leave less than 600 million survivors living like 17th century serfs at the end of the century. And without easily access, crustal resources means civilization will enter an unrecoverable dark age. Consider paths with expanding tech and resources. For example, Earth with an infinite energy source. It would allow humans to build a 1,000-story building that covered the entire Earth. There would be no sunlight and no ecosystem, but there would be space and life support for a population of many billions. It would also be paved over. Another step, super tech solution is miniaturization. If humans change from biological to digital forms, if the Earth does not have to feed or keep warm biological bodies, it could support a much larger number of digital humans. Another super tech solution is humans escape Earth. This solution may not apply to 8 billion in the next 80 years. However, some people might live on space stations. They might use space elevators. Tech might advance enough that travel exceeds the speed of light. Or wormholes allow instantaneous travel to different space and time dimensions. civilization might be escaped. Now you have visited the highly probable path forward, the one where we keep doing what we're doing with tech we have, the one where 13.4 billion people die of starvation and conflict this century, and less than 600 million survivors are trapped like 17th century serfs. You have visited paths resulting from expanding tech and supporting resources. The first will support a larger population. It paves over Earth. The second supports a larger population, but it converts biological humans to digital beings. And a third allows the escapees to live off planet, but not everyone. All three depend on super tech, which may or may not come online or have the bandwidth. Facing myself with three improbable technological paths and one physically improbable path, I have designed four new pathways to arrive at my design and viable civilization. I have already described my vision of a variable civilization in a video, a non-injury producing civilization, which I presented in at CACOR. And for which I have created a link in your invitation to this Zoom video. Let me forewarn you, the activities that will be listed in these four blocks only become possible after two technological achievements are in place. A sterilization, 8 billion person population, and a process for creating babies without their participation. Let me repeat that. The activities that will be listed in these four blocks only become possible after two technological advancements are in place. A sterilization of 8 billion people and a process for creating babies without their participation. Their names, the names of the four parts: 8 billion person population, 8 billion person population path, replacement population path, and replacement population. The fourth one is human capacities advance path. Here is a skeleton view of the activities in each path. These three paths must fully be executed before 2100 because that's when we run out of gas to implement it. See civilization running out of gas. It's listed in your invitation to this meeting. On this path, 8 billion people must leave the surface. However, not before they perform their contributions to creating a viable civilization. The 8 billion will be replaced by 0 million people, billion people. The 8 billion path will be replaced by zero people. These 50 million will be loaded into the lifeboat cities that will be created by activities in this path. After the lifeboat city states are launched at the end of this century, the fourth path kicks in. The 50 million have to advance their capabilities two ways: new energy sources to replace the 300-year-old hydroelectric dams, which are failing, and upgrade the cognitive abilities of each individual so he or she chooses a behavior that dominates the behavior offerings from his or her limbic brain. Failure of either advancement process will activate this path, which leads to a dark age. There are thousands of pages at the Skill website, 35 videos posted to Skill's YouTube channel, and 5 timeline books published at Amazon that describe in detail the development of each activity in these four pathways. They cannot be presented in this video. However, I can give an example of how these explanations describe each activity and how they interact with other activities in the model. Let me use age distribution accommodation activity in the 8 billion exit path as my example. Here is the graph that tracks the 80-year changes in population groups. Because 8 billion people are sterilized and they are in the process of exiting, the population axis declines from 8 billion to 0. And by not having children, the population decline, the curve, declines by 1 billion each decade. In 8 decades, everyone in the original population has been buried, and the global population is 0. The height of the red triangle at each point in time shows the portion of the 8 billion population that's in development. That portion declines from 22.5 billion in year 1 to 0 billion in the year 25. That's the students exiting and becoming part of the workforce. The workforce in blue declines from 4 billion in year 25 to 0 in the year 65. The required portion in green does not start decreasing because they're retirees. They don't start decreasing until year 65, and the number of retirees is 0 in the year 80. What did we learn from modeling the age distribution accommodation activity? Most of the design, building, and loading of the lifeboat cities performed by the 8 billion would have to be completed while the workforce was capable. That is, before the 65th year, when the youngest person alive would be 65. Work required after the 65th year would have to be done by a robotic staff. After the 65th year, everyone left of the original 8 billion would be able to perform less and less of their own support, which means they would need robots to grow their food and take care of their personal needs. What about the population loaded into the lifeboat communities? Couldn't they help? No, that group is too small. Their presence in this graph is this thin red line, which you probably did not see, even though that line thickens by a factor of 50 the entire 80 years. Each person of working age in the lifeboats would have to fully support 200 retirees. Fleshing out this part of the model reveals many components of the multitude of transition paths, which would have to be robotic staff. Many of your questions about this complex model are addressed in the skill webpage, the skill notes, the videos, and the 600-word summary. This is where they're found on the skill webpage. And this summary is a pretty good place to start if you're trying to understand what's going on at skill. My objective in presenting this model is not to convince you that I have answers. It is to recruit those of you that understand the severity of the human predicament and have not given up looking for ways to transform our present rush toward termination into a viable civilization. It is to recruit you that understand the severity of the human predicament and have not given up looking for ways to transform our present rush toward termination into a viable civilization. I welcome your contact and I thank you for listening. All right, back to you, Barry.
Okay, thank you, Jack. And thank you to those who are still on board. And I noticed there are already questions in the chat. Jack, I'm going to ask the first one though. Um, and I'm thinking about these infants that are loaded into the new civilization. And I've heard you say that they need to be isolated from us. I'm not quite sure what that means, and I'll have to admit that it brings to mind what happened in Romania, for example, in the 80s, where infants were severely delayed in their cognitive development because no one gave them tender, loving care. So, can you just fill in the blanks there?
Barry, it's an incredibly good question. Um, there's two reasons they have to be isolated. One reason is that if they weren't isolated, all of the momentum in the current culture could be imparted to them, and we would prefer that they didn't have the momentum. The beliefs that there should be a hierarchy, that there should be territorial rights. They're being inducted into a lifeboat community where there is no private property. And so while the 8 billion people will be building this lifeboat community and managing some of its operations, why during the 100 years that this community of 50 million infants are growing into it, they can't they can't impart their view that the outside world's government is uh, in bad shape. So you asked the question specifically about their cognitive development, and actually, in 1980, I wrote a dissertation called Future Imaging Skills in Sustainable Societies, in which I attacked that problem exactly. I didn't say I would be able to give the infant everything, but I gave a list of abilities that the infant would have to manage their spaceship because that's what the dissertation was about. It said you got to design the learning environment, but you didn't get to go along.
Right. So, Jack, if they're isolated from us, I suppose that means human beings. Are they being raised by robots?
Yes.
Ooh, okay.
Yes, it would be an AI environment, an entirely an AI environment. Now
Okay.
you get to design the environment and you get to control it, but you follow certain rules that you can teach A causes B and C causes D, but you're not allowed to add your opinion that outcome B is better or worse than outcome D. So there's kinds of things you can teach, but there's kinds of things that you're not allowed to impart. The, the kids with their own cognitive abilities have to derive their own morality. How does a child develop an ability to give a future abstraction meaning? Certainly not from us.
Okay. I think we'll leave that there because we've got quite a number of questions here. Steve Kurtz, I'm going to ask you to ask your question, and Claude Bettner, you're up on deck. And when you ask your question, could you please turn on your video and your audio? So, Steve Kurtz, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Jack.
Hi,
Um,
glad to see you.
it wasn't set up as a question, but it qualifies. I made a statement that not everyone hopes for the future conditions you described for 2300 in the beginning of your talk. I said most have no conception of that time frame. Most are living in urban and suburban areas. And I put in parentheses beavers, etc., that I recalled from your comment about the natural world. I think it's a small minority of us who are comfortable and aren't scrambling just to survive that can contemplate preserving that. That's why there are not many conservationists around. But I'll let you respond.
You've set up a description of yourself as a person with capabilities to see future events and to give them value. And you're saying that those people don't exist in the
I said
world.
they were a minority.
They're such a small minority that the very first thing I proposed is a virus that is created and implemented by a single individual. That's what was in the first talk.
I'm aware of that, but the introduction to this was setting up a plan for the future that you wanted cooperation on, and you made an assumption that most people had this desired conception about the future. And all I'm saying is most people do not. If you disagree, fine.
No, no, no. I agree with your statement. The question is, does the 8 billion people that exist today play a role in those four plans, the pathways? All of the activities in those four pathways on the right-hand side of the screen are designed by a small group and implemented in the condition that the population is going away. The 8 billion, when they wake up tomorrow morning and they're sterile, have two choices. They can go play golf, or they can do any number of other things, but I don't need them. And I don't need their thinking doesn't play a role in designing these activities. Does that answer your question? I'm not counting on any of the 8 billion to help. Uh, in fact, I have some relatively simple transitions that I've thought up that are in the activities on those paths. How do these cities of 10 million get built? And who does it? And why do they do it? And one of the fantasies in one of these activities is that when 8 billion people get up in the morning and find out everybody in the world is sterile and they're all gone at the end of 80 years, that a couple of things will start manifesting. The first is uh, I'm not leaving anything for anybody. I mean, what one fantasy is that they'll figure out that there's no more conflict, because if you're losing 1 billion people a year, the pressure on the remaining resources drops pretty fast. So could they give up their military once they realize that nations aren't going to be fighting one another because there's space being created every year by the absence of people? So if they give up the military, if every military person in the army, 10 million of them, was let loose and assigned the job of cleaning up toxic waste and putting to putting to sleep old oil refineries, is the magnitude of the activities and dollars of the 10 million people under arms. Would the 8 billion let their governments do that? It would sort of be like a NASA space program.
Well, I don't think you're directly answering my question, but that's fine. I'm going to turn off and let you continue on what you're describing. Okay?
Thanks for your question, Steve, and you're right. I think we could continue on pretty much all day, and we don't have that sort of time. Claude Bettner, you're next.
Actually, I was just trying to mirror the what Jack was saying about the previous CACOR. I was trying to get those links in the chat for our permanent record, and also the skill.org workable link in the chat. And that's all. And my other comment is for after all the questions are addressed, which means that it may not be for the recorded portion of the presentation. Thank you, though.
Thanks,
Okay,
Claude.
Peter McKinnon, and so Claude, I have you down again as as the real question. I'm not sure.
No, it's just a comment, and we can save that. I'd rather have all the other questions ahead of me in line.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, then, if that's the case, then Peter McKinnon, you're up now, and it looks like you maybe have two questions here. so you can maybe get them both in. And let's try to keep the questions and the answers a little bit more compacted. And then Charles Hall, I think, is after that. Okay, so go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Barry. And Jack, that was a very interesting, and I'll use the word aspirational, but it was aspirational in a way that the future looks rather dim. So my first question, and thank you for the opportunity to ask the second one. So I'll just read it as it posted in the chat. If we survive to have a future of a paved over Earth, as you described, what kind of global governance do you see in your various scenarios?
Actually, I've answered that question in several skill notes.
Okay.
It's not a pleasant thought. I don't think it can be done. If you go back to the CACOR presentation, the non-injury producing civilization, the government of these lifeboat communities is essentially a jury system. And you give up your job, you go be a jury member for a year. You can only be a jury member once in your life, and then you go back, and the jury is continuous, and the jury is deciding in this lifeboat community whether or not to spend community resources for tennis courts or soccer fields. And so when an individual goes to sit on the jury, he votes his own vote. It's there's no politics. It's he is an isolated person. He gets to vote his position as an individual, but he's one member of the jury. The votes are secret and they don't have to be defended. It's just a list of items on a list that the jury gets to decide for that particular time period. So because you don't get elected to the jury, and because you can only be on the jury once, the concept of political power doesn't exist. Does that make sense? I mean, there's
It
some other
makes sense
reasons.
to
There's some
some
other
extent.
reasons. There's no private property at this community, and there's a huge minimum basic income, so that the basics of life are really covered completely. And all the civic community doing is saying whether or not the trains run every 15 minutes or every 20 minutes, or tennis courts versus volleyball courts, or whether or not we're going to have knee replacements over heart valves or heart valves over knee replacements as the universal health care. So the decisions are individuals voting their own genetic predispositions. They're not political. The people didn't even know who's on the jury. They just know that the jury decisions come down.
Peter, does that
Yeah.
more or
Well,
less
that
answer your question?
Yeah, well, it shapes an answer to the question, and because it is multiple answers are possible, I'm sure. Just to go to my second point, and it's a very quick one, Jack. It struck me as you described the dystopian part of your scenarios as sort of like the Soylent Green movie, the dystopian movie about the future. Can you make any comment? How do you see a link if you're familiar with that particular movie?
Well, what they decided in Soylent Green was that when the people who were just so fed up with the system could go euthanize themselves and they became food. Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
What's your question relative to this? What relationship do these lifeboats have to the Soylent Green?
Yes. I
None.
guess I.
The people on the lifeboats are completely an isolated community that represents a half of 1% of the current population, but it's not 1% of the existing population. 100% of the current population die of old age only. No starvation, no conflict, not only that, but the exiting population, because it's getting smaller and smaller, the amount of resources per person goes up and up. They're really living in fat times. Okay. It
Okay,
also,
thank you.
the politically, the people say, well, there's no private property on the lifeboats, but there's still private property of the 8 billion. But it turns out that as the 8 billion exit, everybody who dies has to will it to somebody. And it gets to be a smaller and smaller group till the last man standing. And when he dies, the inheritance falls to nature. So there's an exit plan that is kind of nice because every year the number of people that you have to feed is getting smaller. They're getting older and more decrepit, which is why I proposed the robot solution. I said we just can't let them die of old age because they're going to 5 years from finish, there's going to be 500 million people who are 75 to 80. And they're going to be dying at the rate of 20% a year. That number, the 20% goes up.
Mhm.
So the whole political, the reason I said we can't allow the educational process to reinfect the people on the lifeboats because we, over the course of 500 years of civilization, have created all these things about private property and political organization and nation states and boundaries. And all of that turns out to be a whole lot of momentum in the wrong direction. So the question is, what's the quickest way to get rid of that and start something fresh? It's a complete reset. And the graduate student with the sterility virus did the reset. It wasn't a political decision. It wasn't autocratic top down or grassroots bottom up. It was one person making the decision based in the book, Time Blind 2, we wrote two chapters. One was the AI created the virus, and the other chapter was the graduate student created the virus. But the idea was the public wasn't involved in the decision at all, which is the answer to Steve Kurtz's question.
Yep.
You know, people aren't gonna. And if I hope Bill Rees is here, because Bill Rees is a very strong proponent that we're not set up to fix the problem. And he's right. So the question is, can we still find a path forward that with Bill being right and Steve being right, there's a path to a viable civilization? And
Jack,
all
Peter.
sits on top of your question, which is what's the political structure of what's in the lifeboat?
Yes.
So let's go on to the next question, and we can come back to this if we
Yeah.
want to. Charles Hall, it's time for your question, and Art Hunter, you're next up. You're up to bat next. So Charles.
Hi, Jack. I've been following your stuff for, I don't know, four decades and whatever. And I think I have yet to meet another person that recommends as drastic a solution as you. And so my first question is, well, if we can support 8 billion, why don't we go down to 4 billion? And then, we should be, or maybe 1 billion,
Oh, Charlie, what a straw man you just set me up.
Yeah. And the second one is, nobody I have ever met would vote for you for president. I think I might, but I'm not sure that anybody else would. And so you've got to become the dictator king, or your graduate student who makes the virus or whatever. You have to make that decision, which seems to me in most people's minds who most people I know want grandchildren, and they want to have property and stuff like that. Just sort of what normal humans want. And so they're going to look at you as worse than Trump. And how are you going to paint yourself as the savior of mankind, as opposed to the worst human that ever existed in the minds of the historians?
Well, let's go back to the very first part of your question. How did I come to be such a weirdo? And the answer is because I listened to Charlie Hall's.
Yeah, because you can't figure out any other pathway. But
'Cause
I can. But I can. You listen to me. But I could say, okay, let's go down to 1 billion.
No, but Charlie, what you're not doing in it, not only do we have an EROI, but we have energy return on energy invested or net energy. Not only is that a number, but there's a timetable for that change. And Charlie,
All right. I've tried to calculate it, and I understand all that.
well, wait a minute. Have you calculated at how many people are going to eat in 2050 on the current path? And it's probably going to be 4 billion. And by 2060, it might be 2 billion. And not that, they might be dying from conflict rather than starvation at that point.
Well, I think that will be true.
So, Charlie, the answer to your question, um, am I a made? I'm not. I'm only sitting here postulating as an engineer whether or not this machine can go forward with the resources that it has, and if the only machine that can go forward with the resources we have are much smaller, then we can either talk about how we get to that smaller condition or we can just suffer our way into it. I'm I'm never I don't have to be a leader in this. I'm just the plumber. You called me up and you say, Jack, can you fix our toilets? Okay. There's nothing political about it. I'm a plumber.
Yeah, but people will perceive it as political.
Do I care? First off, they won't know who I am because when they wake up sterile the next morning, they won't know whether or not the Russians did it or the graduate student did it or an AI did it. All they'll know is that everybody's sterile. So the reset's done. There's no political activity to get that far. And once everybody's sterile, the plumbing path is done. I know a billion people a year are going to die of old age, and they're going to be 80 billion, 80 of those groups ending. And at the end of that, they're all gone. And there's no political action involved. There's only shit rolling through the pipe. Does that
Well,
make
then
sense? I'm not the leader.
repackage
I'm
it.
the plumber.
You've got to talk about uh, a positive pathway to meet the future or something like that.
The pathway is you wake up in the morning and create the pathway. The morning you find out everybody's sterile. Then the question is, are there a few people who actually want to design these lifeboats? Are there a few of these people who want to develop the learning environment for the infants? Are there a few of these people who want to manage the exits the aging strategy for the 8 billion? I mean, that people can decide to be plumbers in each of those three activities. Now, the fourth activity, the one at the very bottom of the screen,
You gotta sell it as a plan to avoid human misery or something like that.
who's selling it?
Oh, you're not selling it. So that means you're going to be the dictator that imposes it.
No, the graduate student imposed it.
Have you got the graduate student picked up?
No, I'm saying I said that there are probably 1,000 labs with 1,000 graduate students, and my partner, Robert Castillo, said, it's going to be an AI that in a wet lab creates the virus and releases it because they realize that the current community of humans on Earth are wackos, and that anything good
Well, I don't disagree
anything
with
good
that.
happening out of this experiment of humans on Earth is going to have to be reset. And that's not a political decision. That's just a condition that it's like a stopped up toilet. It has to be fixed.
Charles, you can carry on. We do have some time, but
Yeah. Well, I made my point not very well. So,
all right. Why don't we move on to a question that's from Art Hunter? It's a little more concrete. Maybe it's literally concrete.
Well, I don't know what being, because it sort of follows on from what Charlie Hall's been saying. And to put this in context, I want to go back, Jack, to your analogy about the hydro dams ultimately wearing out and failing. Uh, and I say to myself, there's no room for human innovation in here. When under, survival pressures, I expect there'll be a lot of innovation and things that will bring resources and intellectual capacity all together to try and extend life. And dams can be repaired as they wear out, and hence this whole timeline can be stretched out potentially much longer, maybe infinitely. What are your comments on that?
Well, I'm back to the plumber. I got a pipe that's 2 inches in diameter, and I've got so many pounds of poop that has to go down it. And you're saying there might be some magic to make the pipe bigger, or we can thin out the poop, or we can. The question is, you're living in this house, and there's a timeline for how much poop is going to get backed up before we come up with a solution or a capacity to manage it. Right now, given what Charlie's taught me, we don't have the energy to fix the pipes. We barely have enough energy to keep the lights on. And we'll soon, and if we can't keep the lights on, we can't get people fed either. So
I'm not sure I
it's
said
a
that,
timetable
Jack.
problem. You've proposed that there's a high probability that new technology will come online and make the existing visual problems go away.
Yes, or reduce their impact. Yes.
And the question is, with the momentum of 8 billion people, some of them living in places where it's so hot they can't survive, and they come running north to Canada, okay, and they get there with all 144 million people who live in North America are now north of the 38th parallel, and it's just one big group fighting each other for the remaining BTUs out of the abscon, the oil
Well,
shales.
I guess I don't agree with you that everybody's going to behave en masse and all take off at the same time and do exactly the same thing. I'm talking about individuals being innovative, being creative, coming up with survival solutions that don't require mass migration and in fact to find ways, perhaps at a reduced number of people. Most certainly, I'd expect the population to decline considerably, but some people will find a way to. Well, I kind of think it's an extreme to say like the Atacama Desert, um, but in desert situations, we got people doing that now, and and there are in fact, I suspect pockets of people that can survive in small tribal numbers, and do so at considerable periods of time.
Does that mean that all these groups, all these small groups that have isolated themselves in small communities that are stable in their own right, how big a number is that? What
Well,
fraction of the 8 billion are we talking about?
I guess I'm back to this whole concern that says, um, and we did have this with another speaker that says we have had 5 extinction events over the last 13 billion years, where an extinction event is not 100% extinction, but a considerable number of the species, and and that possibly even means that the human species might get extinct in one of these cycles with a 250 million year gap between these extinctions, because a lot of things can happen in that sort of time frame, and maybe humans will come back. um, the life cycle of species on this planet certainly has changed, and I can't see in over the time frame that the universe operates on that we can't see the human species surviving, or maybe it goes extinct. And is that necessarily an issue? Maybe it's a good thing for the planet.
So Art, I think what you're saying is that hopefully, this is a hope, technology will save us, or other developments will save us. And I'm we're running out of questions, I should tell people. So think up some more. And I'm going to ask one of my own. And Peter McKinnon, I think you've logged another question in there. I'll get to you after I have my question answered, because I think it relates to yours. So Jack, and this is also technology. I think we all remember when the COVID virus came along and we developed a vaccine within a year. It's quite possible that the virus, which I realize is hypothetical at the moment, might not spread overnight. And there may be a vaccine that would be developed for it. So my question is, and it relates to governance, will we have a dictator who is strong-willed enough to prevent the development of the vaccine, knowing that if we develop a vaccine, the plans of Jack Alpert will not take place?
That's 100% true. I have no response to that.
Okay.
I will suggest that the concept of a sterility virus, if you have the ability to make the first one, you have an ability to make the second one. You have the ability to make it incredibly contagious. Literally, we're talking, 15 days, everybody in the earth is stable except the guys in submarines underneath the Pacific.
Mhm.
And if you do it right, you make sure that the virus doesn't make you sterile for 14 months, that you catch the virus today, but it makes you sterile 14 months from now. And we can pretty much figure out a way to get almost everybody included.
Somebody has to sort of put the brakes on trying to counter these things.
Right. No, I don't think there are any breaks. Actually, there's a very good book if you're interested in this. It's written by Kurt Dull. It's called The Eden Proposition.
Mm-hmm.
And the book talks about some very rich guy figuring out we're in trouble, and he builds a culling virus. And he's rich enough to get one of his friends to his hunting lodge to talk about whether or not it's better to not use it or better to use it. And it goes through all of there's a couple of people from the CDC who come to the meeting who explain, how viruses move around and how delays are created and how counter vaccines are made. All of this is becoming pretty much common knowledge very soon. And if you and I don't have it, the AI will have it.
Right.
Already AI there are already pharmaceutical companies that are working with the British firm that's doing the protein folding, and they're trying to come up with a protein a virus that can address Parkinson's. And so they're folding up a gajillion million proteins to figure out whether or not we can create a virus. And the good versions are being sent to a wet lab where they're being created, and then they're being tested, and then the results of the tests are being fed back. It turns out that in that loop, there are like 6 AIs who could
Right.
probably do the job without us.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. Anyway, I get the point. Thanks, Jack and Peter. Talking about a little bit about governance, you had a question about the lifeboat surviving without some sort of governance.
Well, Jack had, of course, talked about this committee, but I don't think that would be a way to deal with the full governance of a community of several million in the lifeboat. So I'm just wondering, Jack, if you've given thought, or any of your colleagues, to developing the models of governance for such a
Yeah.
venture into this free space.
If you go back to your invitation for this meeting, the very first line in it that's a URL link says a non-injury producing civilization. It talks about the entire it's the surrounding structure of the lifeboat that make the jury management system a small part. The structure is essentially a much bigger part of the containment and the limits. Like, people aren't allowed to leave the cities because there's no private ownership. They can't take anything with them.
Right.
That people in the cities get free education and free healthcare and free room and board and minimum basic income, and they're in really pretty wonderful shape. If a guy who was 45 years old decided to walk outside the border and just go out in the woods and start shooting deer, uh, is he violating his social contract?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is he could do it, and he would be, but he couldn't take his belt buckle because he doesn't own it. The metal in the belt buckle is leased and belongs to the next 100 generations. So this concept of I have a plumber's view of the lifeboat. What sorts of constraints had to be built to keep hierarchy from establishing itself, to keep private property from or exclusion of personal exclusion from everybody else. So we put in actual structures. Like, if let's assume that you were Bill Gates and you created a very nice product and everybody wanted to buy it, and everybody has these kilowatt hour tokens, which is the energy flow on the lifeboat, and they gave Bill Gates kilowatt hour tokens for his software. Now, it would look like Bill Gates would get really rich. Okay. But the inheritance rules say, Bill Gates, you can get rich, but when you die, you have to give away your ownership of the cash flow in certain size chunks. And those chunks are related to the minimum basic income, maybe 6 times it or 8 times it. And so it just means that Bill Gates would have to give his wealth to 100,000 people. And they
Well,
would
as you
be
know,
richer than
Bill Gates,
everybody else, but it wouldn't last.
as you know, Bill Gates has pledged some years ago to give away the vast majority of his fortune, and his now ex-wife also has pledged the same. So they're following your advice, I guess.
Well,
But what you were describing, and this reflects on another question, if I may ask very quickly. It's already posted. My posted question is: if we survive to have a future of a paved over Earth, oh, sorry, the wrong one. I was asking about why do we have to retire at 65? You made mention of that, there'll be a big wave at
well, just
65.
It was just a way of.
So my question, my question then relates to, retiring at 65 is part of the business as usual model we have. And many of the other things you talked about are about the business as usual model is broken. So I want to ask, are you trying to promote here a new kind of business model for the world? Or is it something beyond that?
Not for use by the 8 billion.
Okay.
The business model is only for use of the 50 million. The the business model of the 8 billion is to run their course and exit.
So run BAU until it's burned out.
That's right. Well, not burned out, died out, not burned out, died out.
Well, I mean, euphemism, yes, died out.
Well, if they don't die from conflict or starvation, I don't feel like I that they're injured. Now, exactly how long a person does useful work, that's up to him. I'm not retiring people. I was just trying to show what portions of the population would exist at various time periods in the next 80 years. It turns out that you have no kids in school after the 25th year.
Mm.
Your workforce, which is normally between 25 and 65, you would have none of them around. You would have productive people who were 65 and older, but the community that's being supported would all be between 65 and 80. And all the people who are 79 are exiting that year. So we our culture says that we have to live inside this box where people do own things, governments do exist, cultures do dictate that you can have 5 wives or you can't have 5 wives. All of that is completely arbitrary. It's all going away. And we don't have to worry about ushering it out or even worrying about what it does. If people start deciding they can have 5 wives, and that's the normal activity of the remaining, whatever remains of the 8 billion. I mean,
So Jack,
yeah.
I'm wondering about culture. So what parts of our culture might we want to place in those lifeboats, and what parts would we want to exclude?
We asked that question in Timeline 2. By the way, if you look behind me are the 5 Timeline books. Timeline 2 actually went into that. And we started saying, we don't want to lose all the music. We don't want to lose the Mona Lisa. But we don't want to include the cultures that created it. We don't want people to know that the only way Leonardo da Vinci could paint things is because he was making war machines. He was designing war machines. That's how he ate. And the Mona Lisa was sort of a side product. You can get paid for that. He just got fed food. So the idea is you have to decide. It's a very big choice what the kids in the lifeboat get from the 8 billion. Like the question is, as the world empties out, does that mean when Paris gets empty that the pieces of the Louvre get distributed to the other cities where people still live? And then do any fraction of them go to the lifeboats, and who decides? So the question is well taken. The part of culture that might get into the lifeboat is grace and beauty. I don't know if the lifeboats need more than one language. I don't know if the lifeboats need more than one colored kid. I don't know if any group that gets into a lifeboat as a group is a potential hazard. You don't want groups, you want individuals doing their own thing. If they can polarize into groups, then the lifeboat community is at risk.
Jack, have you thought of the motivation or the purpose of living for, I guess, the two groups of people? For one, the 8 billion who are suddenly sterile and don't have that purpose in life where they want to raise kids and have them have them be smarter than themselves. And then there's the other group in the lifeboats. Are they going to develop their own religion in a way, or the religion of let's carry on and conquer the universe, or what's going to happen there? Psychologically, I can see there being some strain here.
I'm willing to have all the help I can get on making arguments for why certain things are included and certain things aren't, and what will develop in the lifeboat and what won't. I don't have all those answers. I'm the plumber that's getting, the stopped up toilet fixed. And if you don't get the stopped up toilet fixed, nobody's going to be painting any more pictures of Mona Lisa.
Right. But if you do, out comes the Mona Lisa.
And that's a
Or
very,
equivalent. Yeah.
a very good question. I certainly want the artists among the 50 million to continue being artists or to become artists, because,
Yep. Okay. We seem to be at the end of the questions, and maybe a little bit from Peter McKinnon here that didn't get through, and that talks about the grad student who, and I've thought about this too, he's a lone, or he or she is a lone wolf. They're now accused of engineering, or at least spreading a group of, maybe a group of viruses out there that may cause sterility, but have other side effects, including death. So what is going to keep them, these so-called perpetrators, safe?
well, if you look at the video that I presented 5 weeks ago, it went through the arguments of what this graduate student has to, how they go about making the decision to put their virus in their pocket or release it. So that, I mean, and it was only like 3 minutes.
Mhm. But I can
So
see them doing it, and then I'm looking at the reaction of society.
it won't know who it is. The society will not be able to blame anybody for the virus.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, what are they going to do? If they could find the graduate student and kill him, would it change anything? As far as the plumber's concerned, the pipe's unstopped.
Yeah. So the fate of the grad student is unknown and
It's
irrelevant.
anonymous.
Right.
The graduate
Yeah.
students are not, and if it's an AI, it's even more anonymous.
Yeah. So Peter, this was part of your question. Any comments?
Nothing to add on that side of it. So thank you for posing that, Barry. I did post one more just a few moments ago, and it relates to the lifeboats. And
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just wondering if there's possibility in your futures that scenarios that these lifeboats could actually get in conflict with each other, or are they related to each other in any way? Or are they independent societies on different different vectors?
In the first video, the non-injury producing civilization, the lifeboat is essentially a city near an electrical grid, and there's only 3 places on Earth where the electrical grid is big enough to support a city of 10 million people. China, whose electrical grid is now going to be big enough to probably support 50 million on its own. South America, whose electrical grid, because of the drought, is probably no longer capable of being one of the cities. And the third one was Columbia River, Colorado River, and with Quebec Hydro thrown in to get it up to 10 million. So everything else in the earth, all of Europe, all of Asia, Australia, South America, South Africa, the African continent, nobody lives there. I can't even build one of those cities in those areas. They don't have the infrastructure to create it. These cities were designed by a plumber who said there is this many kilowatt hours flowing. We can, at 96,000 kilowatt hours per person, we can support. The original round was 6 million in the Pacific Northwest. And then we jimmied it by saying the electrical power that comes from a dam is more valuable than the energy that comes from a barrel of oil, because to get the energy out of a barrel of oil, you have to burn it and you're losing 2/3 of it. And that's how we got the population up to 10 million using electric power. And that's still got us to the 96,000 kilowatt hours per person in that city. I haven't done any of the social work. I've only done the engineering work. But my argument is, if the toilets aren't unstopped, it doesn't make any difference how good your social organization is.
Well, Jack, as an engineer, I'm sure you're well aware of the need for more social science in modern engineering, at least people engaged in that. Have you got any colleagues in the social sciences who are looking at your plumbing models? Because it strikes me that there would be considerable value in building this out as a more holistic view, and would be able to answer many of the questions that have been posed today in terms of the social science element. Because you said I'm just a plumber.
Hey, are you volunteering?
No, because I'm on
I'll
the
take your
engineering
help.
side myself.
Engineer.
Although I'm not an engineer, I
No,
I
no,
have
no,
a
you're a social
but
scientist. Are you
but
willing to, are
I'm a
you,
scientist. I am a scientist.
whatever kind of person you are, and you visualize certain kinds of problems of this transition, do you want to fill in the blanks?
Well, I'm very
Don't-
interested, so I will follow up with you separately. I'll certainly check out your videos that you link me to, and reading material. So thank you for that.
I'll be glad to have you. You got a
I
good,
chair the Foresight Synergy Network at the University of Ottawa. Some of the people on this call, in fact, have spoken at that event, and it's like yours. It's we look at scenarios of the future and talk about topical subjects related
I've
to
been to Ottawa. Were you a member of the Ottawa dissenters?
the Ottawa Witch.
Dissenters.
No, no, I
There
wasn't.
was a group, I think it was at least 12 years ago when I was
You
there.
know Jack Smith?
No, the guy who
Okay.
runs the company on Foresight and his son.
Yes, well that was Jack Smith. He probably. So I mean we're taking up people's time here. We could talk about this separately.
Okay.
But I'm sure we know people in common then.
Yep, but the point is, just to remind people, Jack is looking for help, whether it's social work or engineering or whatever else, energy. He needs some help. So, Art, I think we have no more questions, and I think we can go on to the next stage.
All right. Jack, or Barry, can you thank Jack or I can do that.
Okay, why don't you thank, anyway, thank you,
Okay.
Jack, but Art's going to thank you too.
Okay, this is really our end slide, and of course it's kind of important that all of us, reflect on what these models are saying, and clearly we do know that we're on an unsustainable path right now. Your views into the future and some of the difficulties and just the how, from an engineering sense, from a plumber's sense, what is likely to happen and what the options are. And I'm sure this sort of modeling can be include some of the social elements as have been discussed just near the end, and hopefully some more of that can be done, and we can get you back at another time, Jack, to include some of these other elements. You've been with us now. This is your fourth presentation to us, and each one is a valuable learning experience, and to get your thinking process looking more at the end game rather than just worrying about the immediate future.
Yes.
Further, I'd like to make sure that all attendees at this presentation of CACOR Live do in fact come back next week. Every week we have a new speaker with a new topic, and I expect that each one of these will help you understand how other people view our present dilemma of humanity, where we are, where we're going, and how this is going to ultimately impact us all, or at least humanity in some way. Further, we invite all people to make a contribution to this Canadian charity, and you will get a tax receipt. And further, you can join us for free by joining our YouTube followers list, and because this by the way will also end up on YouTube, and so we do have a much wider audience available to us. So with that, what I would like to do is to bring this portion of the recording to an end, and we will see you all next week.
And I think, Art, we want some people, as many people as possible, to stay on for the free-for-all after this is over.